So, if I were to ask you, spiritually speaking, which line are you trying to cross, what would your answer be? This is not a trick question. In your spiritual walk, which line are you trying to cross?
Finish line.
The finish line. Finish line. We often hear the Christian walk is described as the spiritual race. Like Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7, I have fought the good fight, I have ran the race, I have kept the faith. And we know the Christian walk is described as the Christian race. And we hear sermons that are talked about, we speak about the Christian race and the things that we get distracted by. But in this class, partially, we're going to be talking about another line. Because in a race, you have 3 lines. You have the starting line. And as Christians, spiritually speaking, our starting line is when we are baptized. We come out of the water and we start running our spiritual race. And the second line we talk about a lot is the finish line. We have a goal, we have a prize, we have the finish line. But there's also another line that doesn't get talked about as much, but it needs to be. They're called the boundary lines. Every race you see, the runner has a set path. And whether they just be there literally lines or maybe it's just theoretically those lines are there, you have a set path when you run a race. Whether it be in the track, you have a set path and you have lines keeping you in your set path. It's the same way with the Christian race. We have set lines, we have boundary lines that keep us from doing the things we shouldn't. In a race, those boundary lines are to keep you on your path. Whether that be in track, to keep you on yours and not in the other players. Maybe you're running across the country. That path is keeping you from wandering off, to keep you on the trail, and to keep you from cheating. Because it's easy when you're running a cross-country race and you get to a big hill, it's easy to go around. But the race, you're required to go up that hill. Spiritually, it's the same way. We have a starting line, we have a finish, but we also have our boundary lines, which keep us in our path. Keep us from going and trying to make our walk easier when we get to the hills in our spiritual life, to keep us going up that, because guess what? If you go up a hill, you're going to go down. Well, we can think spiritually, I don't want to go up that hill, so I'm going to go around, but God has set us lines to keep us on our path. This is the line we're going to be talking about for the first part of our class, is the boundary line. When you run a race, you have those to keep you in your path. And spiritually, God has put those there so you can, as Paul said, keep the faith. And we can think of spiritually examples of people getting close to the line. And it's our spiritual walks. A lot of Christians we can see when they run their race, they want to get as close as they can to those boundary lines, because in the end, they don't want to have it. They want a free roam race. They want to be able to do what they want and go where they want. That's not how a race works, but that's what they want. So they try to get as close to that boundary line as they possibly can, but still stay in their set path. We can think of lots of examples of that. We can think of our friends. Well, I know I don't need these friends, but what I can do is I can be the example. Some 90% of the time what's going to happen is you're going to fall just like they have. You can't put one good apple, we've all heard the analogy, with a bunch of bad ones and anything turn up good. That one good one's going to end up rotting just like the others. So we say, well, I don't need these friends because they are distracting me, but I can be the example. Well, I'm not supposed to tell lies, but I'm just going to tell a little white lie. By the way, those don't exist. It's still a lie. Well, I don't need to do certain things because it is sinful, but instead I'll just look. There's a difference. Just a look. Nothing more. Just look. And we can think of examples in the Bible where people tried to get as close as they could to their line. Someone turn your Bible, or actually all of us, but I'd like someone to read Genesis chapter 12, verses 10 through 20. It's a little bit of a reading, but I would like one of you to read that for us. Genesis chapter 12, verses 10 through 20.
Now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say, you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house, and for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had.
So what happened was Abram, because of a famine, Abram and Sarai, which would later become Abraham and Sarah, they were going to Egypt, and Abram, he knew what would happen if they found out that Sarah or Sarai was his wife. They were going to kill him, so Pharaoh could take Sarai as his wife. So he says, look, when we get there, I want you to tell them you're my sister. That was not fully a lie, because Sarah was partially Abraham's sister, so it wasn't a full lie. So when they get there, she says, well, I'm his sister. So Pharaoh takes her. Well, God afflicts him because, well, what he has done. And so Pharaoh's like, why'd you do this to me? Take her and get out of here. I want you to go. Abram, he wanted to get close to the line, but he didn't want to cross it. He said, look, you just say you're my sister. That's it. It's partially true. It wasn't a full lie. If you don't remember anything else in this class, remember this. When you get close to the line and all you're thinking is about, I'm still on this side of the line, you've already seen it. You've already crossed it. Don't get close to the line if you're not ready to cross it. When you get close, you've already crossed it. Abram, when he said, she's my sister, you say that you're my sister. When she said that, they'd already crossed the line. Pharaoh, in Moses' day, when he said, oh, you can go, and then he went after them. Well, he did let them go, like he said he would, but he just went back after them. Well, he'd already crossed the line. David and Bathsheba, all he did was look. He didn't do anything. All he did was look. When he looked, he'd already crossed the line. Lot's wife, God said, don't turn around. I don't even want you to look. Well, all she did was look. She didn't turn around. She didn't stop. She just looked. Well, when she looked, she'd already crossed the line. We can think about it in today. If we have to make ourselves believe that we're on the right side of the line, we've already crossed it. And we can go through the whole class talking about times when we're trying to ride the line. In fact, I want to do this for a minute. What examples do you have of when we try to get close to the line? There's a lot. And I mean this as spiritually, us as Christians, when do we try to get close to the line?
I think when we make the assumption that going to all the services is enough.
It's a good one. I didn't think about that. My belief is all I have to do is I have to go to the services. If I am making myself believe that, I have crossed the line. And we don't think about that as being something we're doing to cross the line. We think of the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, and the lust of the eyes and all those things, but it doesn't have to just be the sins in Galatians chapter 5. It can be other things, like making myself believe all I have to do is go to church and I'm good. If I'm making myself believe I'm on this side of the line, as long as I'm going to services and not doing the other things that the Bible tells us to do in order to run the Christian race, we've already crossed the line. And it's with anything else. Any other examples?
Entertainment.
That's a good one. Well, this movie or this book, or this song. It can be anything. It only has one word in it we shouldn't say. Just or one thing in it it shouldn't have. Just one thing. As long it's just one thing, we can forget about it. If I'm having to make myself believe one is okay, I'm already on the other side of the line, and I'm trying to make myself believe I'm on the other. It's the same way I heard a story, the new Buzz Lightyear movie that came out. It was the story of Buzz Lightyear off of Toy Story. I actually wanted to watch that because I was curious, because I've watched all the Toy Stories, and I wanted to see Buzz's story. Well, it comes out that one of the main characters is a woman, and she is married to a woman. And they're only seen together once or twice. That's it. Nothing else. And I heard a story, I don't know if it was true or not, but it still stands true. The kids were telling their dad, look, we got to go watch the movie. It's just one time. It was just a couple scenes, and that's it. We can just throw that out of our minds when we see it. It's fine. And the dad said no. The kids didn't understand, so the whole day, the whole night, they were mad at him. Of course, when kids don't get what they want, it takes about a day to get used to what he said. Well, the dad that night, he makes a batch of brownies, and he brings it to the kids, and he says, and they go to eat it, and he says, before you do, I put a little bit of dog poop in that. Just a little bit. In fact, you'll never taste it, and probably it's in the brownie you're not going to get. So don't worry. It's only in one of them. Or maybe it's in all of them, but it's just enough that you won't even taste it. Don't worry. I mean, there's enough chocolate to overpower it. Don't worry. And the kids, they went on to say, Dad, that's disgusting. Just a little bit, it ruined the whole batch. It could be in any of that. And maybe we can't taste it, but it's still there. That's disgusting. We don't want to eat that. And the dad said, and that's why you're not watching that movie. It's just a little bit. Just a bit. Just enough, man, I can skip that. I can throw it out of my mind. Maybe it's not even going to be in the part of the movie. Maybe it's in the part of the movie where I have to go get snacks or go to the bathroom. Now, maybe I'll never see that. What doesn't matter? Just a little bit ruined the whole movie. Jesus said a little leaven leavens the whole lump. The same way with a song. The song, it has one word in it. One word. I mean, I can skip that. We can skip parts of the song. We can skip that. We can turn down the volume. That doesn't matter. It's still enough to make God hate it. It's still enough to ruin the whole thing. Same way we can put something bad and something great. We can put just a little bit of paprika in your water. That's disgusting. Just a little bit though. Just one flake. How many of you are still going to drink that? Well, I do, but not in my water. I don't want to drink that. Just a little bit though. That's just not enough to ruin it. And by the way, maybe I won't even taste that. Well, it's still there. Same way with our entertainment. If I'm trying to make myself, it's with anything, if I am trying to make myself think it's okay, if I'm having to have a conversation or debate inside of me whether or not I should do this, I'm already on the wrong side of the line. And we can go on and do lots of other examples of when we are trying to make ourselves believe I am on the right side of the line. If I'm having to debate with myself, whether or not I'm on that line, on that side, I'm already on the other. And our Christian brethren, even in the Lord's church, we try to get as close as possible to things we don't need to do. Well, our clothing is another one. Well, it just shows a little bit. Not much. Just a little bit. If I'm trying to get so close to the line that I can't tell if I'm on top of the line or over it or on this side, I'm already going to cross. If you're driving on the road and you're driving right on the end of the road, you're going to have those bumping things to try to remind you to get back over. But if you're ignoring those and you're just trying to see how long you can ride up right on top of the road, what's most likely going to happen? You can go off. It's really hard to just keep straight on the line. Same way spiritually. When we try to ride the line, we're trying to stay just this side of it. Usually we're trying to ride the line. Most of the time, we're going to go over. If I asked you, Tim, I want you to go in the auditorium, and in front of that, the aisle where you have to go through the pews, through the center, I want you to run right through it with your eyes closed. But Carla's going to tell you if you start getting too close. She's going to say, get over. Now, there's a chance you may run into the pews once or twice. because that still can happen. But if I told you to walk, just walk. Nice and slow, and if you start getting over, she's going to tell you to get back. Now, if I told you, I want you to get as close as you possibly can to that pew, about that far, and I don't want Carla to help you, you start walking. Don't run into the pew at all. If you run into the pew, you're over, you lost. You would 100% run into that pew. Or maybe not that one, but that one. It's the same way spiritually. We have our race, and we do not have a wide open range. We do have a set path. And we're walking, and spiritually speaking, we're running. But God's there. If we're trying our best to stay centered and stay running, through God's Word, He's going to tell us you need to get over it. You're getting too close, get over it. But if we are trying our best to ride the line, if we're trying our best to ignore what God has said, and we're trying to get that close to the pew, God's not going to be there through His Word telling you to get over. Because then when you try to ride the line, you no longer care what God's saying. So you're blindly just running by yourself, trying to get as close, but not hit it. Because in the end, whether you want to or not, you're going to cross that line. Whether you mean to, it's undetermined, but in the end, you're still going to cross it. It's with all things that we have to consider getting close to the line. In doing so, we've already crossed. Some of the greatest men in the Bible, they tried to ride the line sometimes. Peter. He was sitting and he was eating with the Gentiles. They were eating, they were having a good time, but there was no other Jews there. It was just Peter and a bunch of Gentiles, and they were eating and they were talking. Then the Jews got there, and Peter got up off the table and he went and sat with them because he didn't want them Jews thinking he was talking with the Gentiles. Well, Peter was doing a good thing, wasn't he? He was eating with the Gentiles. When the Jews got there, he moved. Well, I'm right. He was riding the line. I'm supposed to fellowship myself with all Christians. It doesn't matter where you're from. Well, he ate with them. He did something good. But when he realized Jews were there, he moved. When he was trying to ride a line in between not fellowshipping with them and doing it, he was trying to ride that line. I'm going to do it as long as no one sees me. When he was already riding that line, he'd already crossed it. Paul called him out for it. Paul told him, look, you are crossing the line even though you're trying not to. We can think of lots of other examples. We already talked about David. Lots of other people. We have to watch out for those boundary lines and realize that they're there. God put boundary lines in our spiritual race for a reason. The same reasons refs put boundary lines in a race so you don't, for one, cheat. In a track race, you have that oval kind of shape and you have your set track. It'd be a lot easier to just dart across instead of taking that whole route, but there's a reason you have to take that whole route. Same way with cross country. There's a reason they take you up hills and around and every direction. It'd be a lot easier to just go straight. But there's a reason that they want you to go the way they do. Same with God. God put boundary lines for a reason. And sometimes those boundary lines will take us up a hill that we don't want to go to. Or maybe a really long loop that we could have just went straight and it would have been a lot easier. But God put those boundary lines for a reason to keep you on the path and to keep you towards the goal. And for the last moment, I don't know how much time I have left, but I also want us to talk about the other line. We've alluded to it, and that's the finish line. You know, when we're running our spiritual race, we start at baptism, we come out of the water, we start running. And we have those boundary lines from the start to finish, in which God is telling you if you are trying your best to walk, run straight, and in the center, then God's Word, He's going to tell you to get over. Get over. And as you're running towards the goal, you're running towards, as Paul said in verse 8 of 2 Timothy 4, in verse 7 he says, I fought the good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. Henceforth there's laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me at that day. Not to me only, but to all them that love His appearing. He'll go on to say more, but he's talking to Timothy, and he's saying, this is Paul's final words, basically, in which he's telling Timothy, look, I'm about to die. My time has almost come. I'm almost ran my race. I have finished it. I'm about to die. And he says, but I'm going to get a crown of righteousness. And he said, I'm not the only one. He said, everyone else, every other Christian that runs the race will get one. And you know, when you run a race, what he means by that is you stay on the path. You know, we focus on the fact that we have to run the race. We have to run the race, but we never focus on the fact we have to run the race correctly. But Paul said, look, I have ran the race. Paul was in Rome at the time he was writing 2 Timothy, and it was there he would give his life for Christ. He would become a martyr. It is believed that Paul was beheaded. We do not know. That is just what history counts. But there's a lot of men that would write similar things. Peter, for one, in 2 Peter, he would write about how he was about to shed his tabernacle or his body. And he was writing to the church, and he would say, I want you to keep these things in remembrance. I did a sermon on this here about how we are to add to our faith. Peter, not calling it a running the race, but he was meaning the same thing. You got to keep adding. You got to keep running. Because if you stop in a race, you're going to slow down. You don't stop. You only stop for a break, but then you keep going. That's what Peter was saying. You got to keep going. Peter would end up giving his life. History accounts that he was crucified upside down because he did not want to be crucified like Jesus. We do not know if this is true or not. We know James, the apostle, was beheaded. And we know others will be stoned and beheaded and so on and so forth. The apostles, all of which, except for John, would give their life. And they would all finish their race. But Paul, for one, he was in Rome and he was writing letters. Paul's story, we know it's interesting. He starts out, comes in the Bible as the man holding the coats of the men stoning Stephen. Then he's talked about as the man he's hunting down Christians. That is what he's doing. He's trying to get rid of the way. And he gets to the road to Damascus, in which Jesus' bright light shines down, blinds him. Jesus says, why? Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Then he goes to Damascus, and there he finds Ananias. He's baptized, and he straightway or immediately after he starts teaching. Then the Jews want to kill him. He gets to Jerusalem. The Christians won't do anything with him because they know who he is. And they think he's come to trick them and take them all to prison. So they're all keeping away from him. But it's by Barnabas' influence that he's accepted, basically. And then he will take 3 missionary journeys after the wind of itch. He will appeal or talk to Felix, Festus, Agrippa, governors, and a king. He will give his case, and lastly, he will appeal to Caesar himself. And there in Rome, he will write many of his letters, one of which being 2 Timothy. And he writes to Timothy, this is most likely his last letter, and he says, I have finished my race. And he said, I'm going to get a crown of life because I have ran my race and I've ran it correctly. He said, but I'm not the only one that will. You will too, Timothy, if you run correctly, if you keep the faith. In order to keep the faith, you have to run your race correctly. That's what he was saying. And so, then in Rome, he will be martyred for Christ. All these men, and not only just the apostles, we focus on the apostles, but if you read Hebrews 11 and get to the bottom, it'll talk about all the different ways the followers of Christ were killed. They were sawn asunder, which means you were cut literally in two. They were hung, they were stoned, they were beheaded, they were crucified, they were lit on fire. They were put in arenas and they would fight wild animals in which they would always usually lose. And so on and so forth. They were just being killed. They would have to wander and hide for their lives. These people were running the race. They were fighting the warfare we often can call the Christian life the walk of battle, and it is. A spiritual battle, but it's also a spiritual race. When we start, we got to keep running. When we run, you got to stay in your boundaries. Because the sin, all the things, the pleasures of the world, remember, sin is fun. Jesus said himself. Jesus knows. But we cannot fall to his temptations. It's a lot easier in a race to cut that way and make the race a lot shorter and a lot smoother, a lot easier. But in the end, that's not the purpose of the race. The race isn't just to run and make it as quick and easy as possible, how I would like to run it. It's how it's been made for me to run. So, as Christians, we got to remember when we are running our spiritual race, it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be a smooth running across the field. It's not always going to be that perfectly crossed line. Sometimes we're going to have to make loops. Sometimes we're going to have to go up hills. Sometimes we're going to have to go through the mud. We got to remember to stay on our path and not try to make it easier. We got to do what God has said to do and how He said to do it. And if we put God first in our lives, if we are trying our best through His Word, He's going to tell you need to get back up. You need to get back up. Don't try to cross the line. Because if you try to cross the line, the boundary line, you've already crossed it. If you're trying your hardest to get this close, you're already on the other side and you're just trying to get farther. Don't try to cross the line. And if you're trying to cross the line, prepare to cross it because you already have. So remember, as Christians, remember your boundary lines. And lastly, remember the finish line. It's hard sometimes in the Christian walk to remember there is a finish line. When things get hard or tough and persecution comes in whatever form, we often sometimes forget about there is a finish line. And we just want to take the easy route. Remember, if we stay on our path, we have a crown of righteousness.